The morning light slid through the blinds in soft, golden slants. Maya stood barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to whistle, her hand wrapped around her favorite mug, white ceramic, a chipped edge near the handle, and the fading words "You are enough" printed in delicate cursive. It had been a gift from Eric, back when words still meant something. They had lived in the Boston brownstone for almost 7 years now. It was old and creaked with every step, but Maya had made it warm. Earth-toned pillows, little succulents in the kitchen window, frames filled with Polaroids of quiet weekends in Vermont and sunsets at Martha's Vineyard. She made it a home. Eric, her husband of 8 years, was always rushing out, pressed shirts, leather briefcase, and a sharp scent of cologne that never lingered long. He was a partner at one of the biggest law firms in the city now. Maya, once a marketing manager with rising potential, had quietly stepped back from her career 5 years ago after the miscarriage. They had both agreed she needed time. But time became a pattern, and soon, Maya had disappeared from her own ambitions. That morning, Eric was unusually sweet. He kissed her on the forehead, handed her a single white rose he claimed he passed by at a street florist. Maya smiled, her fingers curling around the stem, but something in her stomach twisted, the way he didn't meet her eyes, the way he left too quickly. Later that afternoon, while vacuuming the car to surprise him, something Maya often did out of leftover affection, her hand brushed under the passenger seat, her fingers wrapped around something cool and metallic. When she pulled it out, her breath stilled. A necklace, silver, dainty, with a tiny heart-shaped charm that wasn't hers. It wasn't just the necklace. It was the perfume lingering on it. Not her scent, something floral, bolder, and unapologetic. It was the smudge of foundation on the seatbelt strap. It was the silence that suddenly screamed. Maya stared at the necklace for a long time in the driveway, sitting in the passenger seat like a stranger in her own life. Her throat tightened, but no tears came. Not yet. That evening, she laid the necklace on the kitchen counter, casually, right next to Eric's keys. When he walked in, she watched his eyes fall on it. He paused, just for a second. Then, with the calm of a seasoned liar, he picked it up, chuckled, and said, "Oh, that must be something the dry cleaner left behind. Probably fell out of someone's pocket on the seat." Maya looked at him. Right? Of course. The dry cleaner. He kissed her again. This time on the lips, colder, like punctuation, not affection. She nodded, smiled softly, and said nothing. But inside, something began to shift. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was a slow tightening in her chest, a quietness that didn't come from peace, but from disbelief. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She laid awake listening to Eric's steady breathing, staring at the ceiling fan rotating in slow circles, and thought about all the small things she had ignored. The texts he answered in the bathroom, the weekends he suddenly had conferences, the way he complimented her less and checked his reflection more. She tried to convince herself it meant nothing, that maybe she was overthinking. Maybe grief and loneliness were warping her mind. But the heart, when it's breaking, knows. And Maya's heart was splintering in silence. She didn't confront him. She didn't scream. She folded the necklace into an old velvet pouch and placed it in the back of her drawer beneath her journals. Proof, she told herself. Not just of his betrayal, but of her clarity. Because sometimes, the loudest truths are first whispered through a tiny charm left behind. And Maya? She had just started listening. Maya started noticing the cracks, not the ones in the wall or ceiling, but in the patterns of their life. Eric missed their anniversary for the first time. He sent a brief text at 11:47 p.m. "Sorry, long meeting. Love you." No flowers, no call, just digital distance. Maya waited at the dinner table that evening, candles melted halfway down, food cold. She didn't cry. She blew out the candles, wrapped the food, and put the untouched wine bottle back into the fridge. 3 days later, a coffee mug appeared in the sink. Not unusual, except it wasn't one of theirs. Pale beige ceramic with a kiss mark on the rim, lipstick, a bold berry color, Maya would never wear. She stared at it, then rinsed it clean, hands moving slowly. The stain didn't come off easily. She started keeping a journal again. She hadn't done it in years. But now, every forgotten date, every strange scent, every offhanded excuse found its way onto the pages. The journal became her anchor. She wrote without emotion, without judgment, only facts. A historian of her own heartbreak. One Wednesday, Maya decided to visit Eric at his office. She told herself it was spontaneous, that she missed him. But in truth, she needed to see something, anything. She wore a soft blue blouse he used to compliment and brought lunch from his favorite Thai place. The receptionist looked surprised to see her. "Oh, you're Eric's wife?" The words stung, just a little. "Am I still?" She was told he was in a meeting but would be out shortly. Maya waited in the sleek lobby, cold leather chairs and glass walls making her feel small. Then the elevator chimed. Out stepped a tall woman in a fitted black dress, long dark hair cascading down her back, confidence in every step. She was laughing at something Eric said beside her, his hand briefly touching her lower back. The woman stopped when she saw Maya. Her eyes flicked down, then up, not lingering. Eric froze. "Maya," he said, too brightly. "What a surprise." "I brought lunch," Maya said, holding up the bag. The woman extended a hand. "Celeste, I'm Eric's colleague." Her voice was smooth, her handshake warm. Around her neck hung a silver necklace, heart-shaped. Maya stared at it, just for a second too long. Celeste followed her gaze and casually tucked the charm behind her collar. Eric cleared his throat. "Thanks for the food. I was just heading into another meeting, though." Maya smiled. "Of course, I won't stay long." The three stood there in awkward stillness. Maya handed him the lunch and turned to go. She didn't look back. That night, dinner was quiet. Eric scrolled on his phone between bites. Maya ate in silence. The clink of cutlery was the only sound. Outside, wind rustled the trees. Inside, something had shifted beyond repair. Maya looked at him and wondered if he noticed how far gone they were, how 1,000 little betrayals had carved a canyon between them. After dinner, he went to take a shower. Maya went to her desk, she opened the journal and wrote, "Saw her today. Same necklace, same smirk." He didn't flinch when he lied. I didn't flinch when I saw the truth. I am collecting silence. But silence won't stay silent forever. She closed the book gently. Her hand lingered on the cover. She wasn't sure what she'd do with it yet, but writing it made her feel less alone. Down the hall, water ran. Laughter came from Eric's phone. Another woman's voice, maybe. Maya listened, and she kept writing. The receipt was folded neatly between case files in Eric's briefcase. Maya hadn't been snooping, at least that's what she told herself. He had left the case open on the kitchen chair while taking a call upstairs. She only meant to move it out of the way. But something caught her eye. A glossy hotel logo. Hotel St. Clair, Montreal. 2 nights. A deluxe suite. The dates aligned with a weekend Eric had claimed he was at a corporate seminar in New York. Maya stared at it, her pulse steady. No explanation could cover this. She placed the receipt back exactly where it was and walked into the bathroom. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. The next morning, she called someone from a quiet cafe across town. A referral from Julian, her therapist, though he didn't know what it was for. His exact words had been, "If you ever need clarity, this man finds things without destroying things." The investigator's name was Grayson Lane. Mid-40s, polite and discreet, he met Maya in a rented office space that smelled like old files and quiet truths. She slid the receipt across the table. "I just need proof," she said calmly. "No confrontation, just clarity." He nodded without question. "Give me 2 weeks." It only took 9 days. Grayson returned with a manila envelope. No words, just a steady look as he handed it over. Maya waited until she was home alone to open it. Inside were printed photographs, still frames of someone else's love story. Eric and Celeste, laughing in the hotel lobby, walking along the cobblestone streets of old Montreal, holding hands, kissing, a series of betrayals captured in perfect lighting. There was even one photo taken through a cafe window. Eric feeding her dessert. Maya sat on the couch with the envelope on her lap, the pictures fanned out beside her like playing cards in a game she never agreed to play. There was no rage, no sobbing, just a strange numbness, like her body had decided to float outside itself. She thought about their wedding vows. She thought about how Eric had cried at the altar, how she had once believed she was the luckiest woman alive. That memory now felt like a lie she had memorized. She gathered the photos, returned them to the envelope, and slid it beneath the journal in her drawer. The next day, she made herself a cup of tea. She greeted Eric with a kiss on the cheek when he came home. She asked about his day. She listened as he complained about a colleague being too emotional during a meeting. The irony nearly made her smile. He didn't notice the change in her eyes. Over the following weeks, Maya adjusted her life slowly, subtly. She met with a lawyer under the guise of a writing consultation. She visited her late father's accountant and quietly began moving her inheritance to a separate account. She deleted old files, changed her passwords, took pictures of shared documents. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She simply gathered. It was not revenge, not yet. It was control, a kind of justice that didn't come with noise or fire. Each morning she smiled. Each evening she played the role. But at night she whispered plans into the quiet. She whispered to the woman in the mirror, the one who had forgotten herself, soon, just a little longer. Eric, of course, remained careless. His lies got lazier. His nights away grew longer. Celeste's name came up more often now, always with a tone of forced neutrality as if daring Maya to ask. But Maya didn't bite. She baked more often, took long walks, attended therapy. She rebuilt her strength the way she used to rebuild puzzles as a child, piece by patient piece. The unraveling had begun, but Maya? She was already weaving something new. Maya adjusted her mask with grace. Mornings began with warm coffee and quiet smiles. She folded Eric's shirts, packed his lunch, and kissed him goodbye at the door as if everything inside her wasn't unraveling. But behind the gentleness lived calculation. Behind the softness lived rage. Eric didn't notice the difference. He didn't ask why Maya had started humming again, or why she wore her hair down more often like she used to before they were married. He didn't question her sudden interest in afternoon walks or her new writing group that met every Tuesday. As long as she remained predictable, he didn't care where she went. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., Maya sat across from Dr. Julian North in a quiet, plant-filled room on the second floor of an old brick building. He didn't take notes right away. He listened with the kind of patience that didn't interrupt silence, the kind that waited for truth to rise on its own. In their first session, Maya didn't speak for 10 minutes. When she finally did, it was just one sentence. "I think he doesn't love me anymore." Julian didn't respond with sympathy. Instead, he asked gently, "When did you stop loving yourself?" That question stuck. Long after she left his office, long after she stood in the shower, long after she stared at her reflection brushing her teeth, it echoed, "When did you stop loving yourself?" Week by week, she began to answer it. She talked about the miscarriage, about the slow erosion of her identity, about the way Eric's voice could be kind in public and cold in private, about the way he made her feel dramatic for feeling anything at all. She talked about silence, how it wasn't peace, but a prison. Julian never told her what to do. He just handed her the keys to doors she had been too afraid to open. And behind those doors, Maya found pieces of herself, quiet, bruised, but not broken. She began journaling again with intention, not just to document Eric's betrayal, but to document her return to herself. Her thoughts became sharper, her sentences deliberate. She stopped asking permission in her own mind. At home, Maya was still the wife who smiled over dinner, who laughed at Eric's recycled jokes, who pretended not to hear him texting in the bathroom late at night. She noticed the way he hid his phone when she entered the room. She noticed everything, but her reactions were measured. Her words careful, her eyes calm. She played the part so well, Eric grew more reckless. One evening, while he slept beside her, Maya got out of bed and walked barefoot to the kitchen. She opened her laptop and created a new file titled Phase 1. She didn't know exactly what she would do with it yet, but the act of naming it gave her power. The next day, she offered to help with the laundry and found another receipt in Eric's coat pocket, this one from a boutique jewelry store in the city. Not a store she had ever stepped into. She smiled as she folded the coat. Later in therapy, she told Julian about the receipt. "And how did you feel when you found it?" he asked. "Like I was watching someone else's life," she said, "but also like I was finally holding the remote." That night, Eric came home late again. Maya was waiting by the fireplace, reading. She didn't ask where he had been. She didn't need to. He kissed her on the cheek. She didn't pull away. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm just tired," she replied with a soft smile. He nodded and walked away. But Maya wasn't tired. She was sharpening. And the fire? It hadn't started yet, but the air was warm with smoke. It began over breakfast. Eric poured himself a glass of orange juice and cleared his throat like he was preparing a speech. Maya, already dressed and composed, sat across from him with a slice of toast untouched on her plate. "So," he said, forcing a smile, "there's something I've been meaning to discuss with you." Maya lifted her eyes slowly. "Go on." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, crisp white papers with blue tabs marked the spaces for her signature. "I've been offered a major promotion," he said, tone casual, "but it comes with a chance to buy into the equity of the firm's new headquarters. They're expanding. Big move, big stakes." Maya nodded slowly, waiting. He continued, "But they're requiring co-signers with proof of asset backing. Just temporary. Optics. And I figured," he tapped the folder, "your father's lake house in Vermont, since it's in your name, would be perfect." She flipped through the pages slowly. "So you want me to hand over part of the only thing left from my father?" Eric chuckled lightly. "Not hand over, Maya. Just partial ownership. On paper. It's still yours. It's just, we'd both hold it. Technically. I mean, it's our life, right?" He leaned forward and touched her hand. "You trust me, don't you?" She looked at him, eyes soft but unreadable. "Of course," she said. That night, she didn't sleep. The lake house was her father's final gift. He had left it entirely in her name, free and clear. It was the only place she had ever felt truly herself. Giving even a fraction of it to Eric felt like erasing the last piece of her identity. But Maya had planned for this. A month ago, when Eric first mentioned firm investments, she had sensed where it was heading. She had taken the original deed and visited a separate attorney, a quiet, meticulous woman named Valerie Tran. Valerie specialized in asset protection and had helped Maya file paperwork that would create a buffer of legal steps between Eric and the property. Maya also signed a decoy agreement, almost identical to the one Eric now handed her. Only this version was dated, time-stamped, and notarized earlier. It was a trap, carefully baited. The next morning, Maya told Eric she would sign. She walked into his home office with the folder, pen in hand, and a practiced smile. "Here," she said, placing the signed papers on his desk. "Do what you need." Eric looked at her like she had just handed him gold. He kissed her on the cheek. "You're incredible," he murmured. Maya just nodded. "I know." She left the room and immediately emailed copies of what she actually signed to Valerie. She then printed 2 separate copies for her safety box in the bank, and one more hidden under the false bottom of her drawer. Eric had no idea. Over the next week, he paraded Maya's compliance like a trophy. He told friends how proud he was of her support. He praised her for being so understanding, even through all she's been through. Maya listened, smiled, and poured wine at their dinner parties. But underneath it all, she was documenting every financial step Eric made. The firm's request, the equity draft, the new credit lines he opened. She traced each breadcrumb, not to stop him, but to bury him in his own paper trail. Quietly, power shifted. Eric was still living like nothing had changed. But Maya? She was no longer the woman who asked. She was the woman who watched. And beneath that calm face, her strategy grew sharper by the hour. One afternoon, as he left for a late meeting, Maya stood at the window, watching his car pull out of the driveway. She whispered to herself, voice barely a breath, "You just signed your own fall, and you'll never see it coming." And for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. The charity gala was meant to be elegant, an evening of soft music, polished speeches, and the illusion of generosity that wealthy professionals clung to. Maya had been on the planning committee for 3 months, curating every detail, from the floral centerpieces to the seating chart. It was her return to public presence, and everyone noticed. She moved through the room in a fitted navy gown, her hair swept back, every movement poised. But then Celeste arrived. She wasn't on the list. She wasn't invited. Yet she glided through the entrance in a backless red dress that screamed for attention. Her smile was wide and insincere, her arm looped casually through Eric's. Maya saw them before they saw her. The room buzzed. Whispers slid through the air like smoke. Maya stood tall, wine glass in hand, her lips parting slightly but not to speak. She simply watched as Celeste greeted donors, laughed too loudly, and slipped her hand onto Eric's chest like she owned it. Eric looked uneasy. He hadn't expected both women to share the same spotlight. Maya didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She walked past them once, her shoulder barely brushing Eric's. He tried to meet her gaze. She didn't offer it. That night, back home, Eric said nothing about Celeste's surprise appearance. Maya didn't ask, but she opened her journal again. She wrote down every reaction, every face that turned when Celeste walked in, every colleague who glanced at Maya with sympathy, every crack beginning to show. The next board meeting at the law firm was 3 days later. Maya had received an invitation, not as a guest, but as a silent partner on the equity Eric had so greedily used her name for. It gave her a seat, it gave her access. She dressed in gray, neutral, professional, and forgettable. She sat 2 chairs down from Eric, who still hadn't realized what she had planned. When the meeting opened, there was a routine review of promotions and pending partnerships. Celeste's name appeared under recommended partner nominees. That was the moment Maya raised her hand, her tone polite but firm. "I believe before voting, the board should be made aware of prior litigation involving Miss Varga." Silence fell. Eric turned sharply. Maya continued, sliding a folder onto the table. Inside, records of 2 prior lawsuits against Celeste, one settled quietly, the other still in arbitration. Both related to harassment, manipulation, and use of intimate relationships to gain promotion. None of this had been disclosed to the board. Celeste flushed, her smile evaporating. "That was years ago," she said too quickly. One of the senior board members opened the folder. His brow furrowed as he read. "We have a fiduciary duty to reassess her candidacy," he said plainly. Celeste tried to speak again, but her voice cracked. Eric reached for her arm, but she pulled away. The board moved to suspend Celeste pending a formal investigation. Eric was immediately put under internal review, conflict of interest, failure to report personal involvement, and misuse of assets from his shared equity with Maya. The same equity now flagged as compromised. Eric stood, flustered, ready to argue, but Maya rose first. She simply said, "I'm only here to protect what's in my name." And then she left. Back home, she made tea. Eric came home late, red-faced and silent. He dropped his keys too hard on the counter. "You blindsided me," he hissed. Maya looked at him without blinking. "No," she said softly, "you did that to yourself. I just stopped protecting the lie." He stared at her, unsure of the woman standing before him, because the Maya he remembered would have cried, would have begged, would have left. But this Maya stayed, and that terrified him more than anything. The morning Eric's world began to fall apart, he still believed he had control. He woke late. Maya was already gone, her side of the bed smooth, untouched since dawn. A quiet unease settled over him. He checked his phone. No messages from the office, no morning text from Celeste, who had stopped answering him since the board meeting. He went downstairs, poured coffee, and tried to rehearse the damage control speech he'd been crafting in his head all weekend. It was already too late. At 10:03 a.m., the firm's senior partners received a leak, an anonymous folder delivered to their internal ethics board. Inside, a chain of emails between Eric and Celeste spanning over 6 months. Carefully compiled, time-stamped, clean. Some messages flirted with impropriety, others crossed far deeper lines. There were PDF attachments, altered invoices, questionable transfers, and client reimbursements rerouted into a secondary account Eric had opened under Celeste's name. The source of the leak was masked. The legality was airtight. It wasn't whistleblowing. It was a slow, deliberate reveal of truth wrapped in professionalism. The board didn't call him in for a meeting. They froze his access to client files, removed him from internal systems, and flagged his equity share for legal review. He called Maya at noon. She didn't pick up. He left 3 messages, then 5. Then he drove home early, hands tight on the wheel. The house was quiet. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Not comfortable silence, but the kind that rang loud in the ears. He went to the guest room first. It had become Celeste's temporary haven during the affair, though Eric always called it his workroom. The closet was empty. The drawers too. No perfume bottles on the vanity. No red heels tucked near the window. Just air and stillness. Maya had cleared everything, cleanly, completely. He rushed to the office. His safe was untouched, but when he opened it, the important documents were gone. Not stolen, relocated, controlled. On his desk sat a note, her handwriting, steady, unapologetic. Truth is louder than rage. You taught me that by never listening. Now it's your turn to hear. No signature, just that. Panicked, Eric tried logging into the joint account. Access denied. His personal credit cards declined one by one. The second savings account, the one Maya never touched, was now inaccessible. The funds had been quietly moved in accordance with the prenuptial clauses he'd never bothered to read. Clauses Maya had amended months ago with her own attorney. He stormed through the house like a man waking up in someone else's nightmare. The framed photos were still there, their wedding portrait, a trip to Santorini. But now, the images looked like evidence in a case he was losing. That night, he called Celeste. She didn't answer. He sent an email. It bounced. He tried one last time to call Maya. She answered. Her voice was quiet, not cold, but firm. I told you once that silence was my strength, she said. You mistook that for weakness. That's not my fault. You ruined me, Eric snapped. No, she replied. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped helping you hide it. She hung up. Eric stood in the dark hallway of the home he no longer recognized. Rich in furniture, poor in soul. Every corner felt smaller, every breath heavier. And outside, somewhere far away, Maya sat in her car watching the sunset, her fingers wrapped around a warm cup of tea. She wasn't celebrating, she wasn't gloating, but for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. The courtroom was cold, gray carpet, wood-paneled walls, and the quiet tension of lives being dismantled. Maya sat on the left side, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing a simple black dress. Her hair was pulled back. No jewelry, no dramatics, just presence. Eric arrived with a new lawyer and the remnants of his old confidence. His suit was pressed, his expression rehearsed. He glanced at Maya, but she didn't return the look. Instead, she focused straight ahead, as if she were already beyond the room, beyond the man who had once been her world. This wasn't just a divorce hearing. It was a reckoning. Eric's legal team opened with a predictable narrative. Stress, miscommunication, a struggling marriage, a wife who had emotionally checked out. Eric himself gave a carefully modulated testimony, painting himself as a husband who had made mistakes but tried to make amends. He even choked up once, right on cue. But when it was Maya's turn, she didn't speak for long. She didn't need to. Her lawyer handed the judge a thick folder. Inside, 6 months of documentation, photographs of Eric and Celeste, Some personal, some painfully intimate. Screenshots of emails referencing unauthorized client expenses. Financial records showing deliberate transfers to private accounts, some in Celeste's name. A copy of the fake contract Eric had tried to slip past her. Contrasted with the one Maya had properly notarized. It was all there. Then came the surprise. Celeste took the stand. Subpoenaed, and now under legal pressure, she chose self-preservation over loyalty. She admitted to the affair, confirmed Eric's manipulations, and revealed that he had encouraged her to exploit certain client relationships in exchange for professional advancement. Her voice trembled, but her words were clear. Eric turned pale. The courtroom held its breath as the judge reviewed the evidence. When she finally spoke, her words were sharp and unmistakable. The divorce was granted. All shared assets, frozen. The Vermont lake house, confirmed solely in Maya's name. Eric's equity in the firm seized for investigation. Spousal support denied due to financial misconduct. The ruling landed like the closing of a coffin. Eric slumped in his seat, no longer the man who walked in with arrogance. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder, but he didn't respond. The life he'd built with borrowed lies had collapsed under the weight of Maya's truth. Outside the courthouse, photographers waited. Maya walked past them without stopping. No statement, no smile, just a quiet exit. Eric remained seated inside, staring at the floor. He had lost the house, the firm, the woman who had once given everything. And Maya? She never looked back, because there was nothing left behind her worth seeing. Spring had arrived in Vermont with quiet grace, snowmelt trickling down the hills, the lake thawing at the edges, and yellow tulips blooming near the old porch steps of the cabin. Maya parked her car in the gravel driveway and stepped out slowly, her boots crunching against the earth. The air smelled of pine and thawing soil, a scent that stirred both comfort and memory. It had been almost a year since the divorce was finalized. The legal battles were over. The papers were signed, the accounts divided, the firm swept clean of Eric's name. Celeste had relocated to another city, far from the whispers. Eric had disappeared from the headlines, but Maya knew he was still somewhere, living with the ruins of choices he built himself. But this trip wasn't about him. Maya entered the cabin alone. Dust motes floated in the sunlight that streamed through the window panes. The furniture was still there, familiar, untouched. The kitchen counter where they used to cook, the fireplace they once sat beside during snowstorms, and upstairs, the small bedroom with the creaky floorboard that always made her smile. She carried only one box with her. Inside were a few old notebooks, some photos, and a letter, folded, slightly yellowed at the edges. She had written it nearly 2 years ago, during a night when everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. Dear me, I know you're tired. I know you're wondering if love always ends in silence. But don't become cold, become clear. Don't let his darkness become your reflection. You're still in there. And when you come out glowing, not angry, just free. She read the words once, then again. They didn't hurt anymore. They didn't make her cry. They reminded her of how far she had come. From the woman who questioned her worth to the one who reclaimed it in quiet defiance. Maya stood, placed the letter back in the box, and carried it to the fireplace. She lit a small flame and let the pages burn slowly until the words curled into smoke and disappeared. She didn't need the letter anymore. She wandered through the house once more, touching the walls, the windows, the doorknobs, not with sadness, but with gratitude. This place had witnessed everything, the love, the lies, the unraveling, and now it would witness her goodbye. Before leaving, she walked to the front door and knelt down. Under the welcome mat, she placed a single brass key, no note, no final message, just the key. Maya stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind her, and took one last look. The lake shimmered in the distance. Birds chirped from the trees. Life moved forward, as it always did. She got in her car, rolled the window down, and breathed in the air one last time. Then she drove away, Not with sadness, not with regret, but with peace. The ballroom was filled with light, warm, golden, almost dreamlike. Dozens of tables surrounded a small stage where stories were being honored, where voices once silenced were now given microphones. Maya stood backstage in a soft ivory suit, her hands calm, her breath steady. It had been 2 years since her world collapsed, and since she rebuilt it, stronger, clearer, unshakable. When her name was called, the applause came like a wave. She walked onto the stage with grace, not rushing, not hesitating. Behind her, a screen displayed the name of her organization, the Haven Project, a legal aid initiative for women emerging from emotionally abusive relationships. What started as a quiet promise to herself had now grown into a nationwide support system. Lawyers, therapists, emergency housing, resources Maya once needed, now offered freely to those who did. She took the microphone, smiled gently at the audience, and spoke without a script. There was a time when I believed being quiet meant being strong, when I thought love was measured by how much pain I could carry without breaking. But I was wrong. Real love never asks you to disappear, and real strength doesn't mean silence. It means choosing yourself when no one else does. The room went still, listening. I didn't create the Haven Project out of revenge. I created it out of memory. Because somewhere out there, another woman is sitting in a parked car, holding a receipt she didn't expect to find, wondering if she's imagining everything. I want her to know she's not crazy, she's not alone, and she's not powerless. When she stepped down, the applause rose again, louder this time, genuine, deep. Afterward, during a press moment, a young reporter approached her, nervous, mid-20s, eyes full of questions. "Miss Caldwell," she said, "if you don't mind me asking, was this all revenge? You know, the way it ended?" Maya smiled, the kind of smile that held years behind it. "No," she said, "it was justice. For the version of me who stayed quiet too long." Later that night, back in her apartment, modest, full of books and plants, Maya curled up on her couch with a cup of tea. She flipped through a folder of handwritten letters from women her foundation had helped. One line stood out, "You gave me back my voice." She touched the paper gently, then set it down. Across the room, framed on the wall, was a photograph of the Vermont lake at sunrise. Not of the house, just the water, the sky, the peace. Maya no longer needed to prove anything. Her heart had once been broken, torn in silence, dismissed by someone who mistook loyalty for weakness. But now she walked with purpose, not bitter, not hardened, just whole, because the truth she once whispered had become her legacy, and the woman she became was unforgettable.